You may remember back in March, there was a shocking ruling from a judge in a civil case between Trump lawyer John Eastman, a guy who authored one of many coup memos, but the coup memo as far as we knew then, and the January 6th committee. See, Eastman was trying to prevent the committee from getting its hands on his emails because he was the lawyer, and he says, well, this stuff is privileged. But the judge denied his request, saying, quote, based on the evidence, the court finds it is more likely than not that President Trump and Dr. Eastman dishonestly conspired to obstruct the joint session of Congress, meaning that it was possibly criminal and part of what's called the crime fraud exception. Now, one of the documents in question was a memo prepared by another lawyer for Rudy Giuliani and was forwarded to Eastman. The judge ruled that, quote, it is subject to the crime fraud exception, and the court orders it to be disclosed. Now, the crime fraud exception is exactly what it sounds like. You do not get attorney-client privilege for documents that may have been used to commit a crime. So now, thanks to that ruling, we have that document, the crime fraud exception smoking gun. It is yet another memo, a how-to manual to overturn the 2020 election. The document lays out a plan for Mike Pence to halt the certification of Joe Biden's victory on January 6th. But this memo now raises a whole new set of questions, including the role Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley played as president pro tempore of the Senate. Because the scheme laid out in a kind of instructional fashion in the memo would have essentially worked like this. The vice president announces he will not serve as a presiding officer, despite being his role. Then, in his absence, quote, the president pro tempore acts as the president of the Senate, regardless of whether it's Chuck Grassley or another senior Republican. George Conway is a prominent conservative lawyer and former Republican. Back in March, in response to the ruling that resulted in the release of this new memo, he wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post titled, "A Federal Judge Said Trump Probably Committed a Crime. The Department of Justice Can't Ignore That," and he joins me now. So, George, we have the big reveal here of what this memo was, and it's quite granular in how they envisioned this essentially coup being pulled off. What are your impressions of it?
Absolutely. I mean, the judge was absolutely right to order it released under the crime fraud exception. It was an attempt to completely overturn the election and to refuse to apply the Electoral Count Act, which governs, under the 12th Amendment, governs the counting of the electoral votes by Congress, not by the vice president. And there's even a sentence in a phrase or a lead into a paragraph in the memo that says, any of the outcomes sketched above seems preferable to allowing the Electoral Count Act to operate by its terms. They're basically saying, do anything but allow the law to operate the way it literally says, which is that Congress. So this was, absolutely an attempt to undermine. It was an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding under 28 U.S.C. 1512, and it was an attempt to commit defraud the United States by fraudulently and by false pretenses interfering with the lawful function of government. And this is part of but it's important to remember, this is part of a multifaceted conspiracy to stir the people up, to make them be wild on January 6th, to get them to go up on the Hill, to have these fake electors so that so they can create the pretense that there's some kind of a contest here, and then finally to get the vice president to violate the law or to swap him out for Grassley and have basically the person gavel in or refuse to count the electoral votes that Congress is supposed to count and that were all certified by the various authorities in the various states.
Yeah, I mean, I was rereading the memo. I saw it when it first published, and then I was just reading it before it aired. And, it reminds me a little like if you're ever debugging a program, if you're a computer programmer, or you're troubleshooting something in your house, like light's not working, where what you're doing is you're trying to find, there's 5 or 6 things that have to work together. I'm going to isolate each one and see what's wrong, right? This is like the opposite of it. It's like where are the different places that we could create trouble?
I can screw it up.
That would screw it up and would make the light not turn on. And let's just go through whichever of those we can do.
Right. And, there's so many metaphors you can use. That's a good one. Throwing up everything to the wall and seeing what sticks. This was a multifaceted conspiracy to do whatever it takes, whatever it took to stop the counting of electoral votes on January 6th. And that has to be crime. If that's not a crime, nothing is under these statutes.
That's really the interesting question to me, right? Because this question of, like, obviously at an intuitive level, right? At a basic intuitive level, not in terms of reading the statutes in the criminal code, this is wrong, right? It's obviously anti-democratic. It's obviously lawless and offensive to our conceptions of self-governance. The question of whether it's a technical crime is a more specific one, and obviously the judge ruled in this case, the reason we have this memo is that it was probable a crime was committed. Now reading the memo, like, what is your feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, it becomes more probable with each piece of evidence. And what I hope the January 6th committee will do, and I expect it will do, is even if it has nothing else than what has already been revealed, to go through all those strands and explain how, in various corrupt and deceitful ways, people conspired and attempted, led by Donald Trump, to obstruct this proceeding of Congress and to stop a lawful function of government, the counting of the electoral votes. And if under Section 371 of the conspiracy to defraud statute, people went to jail 100 years ago for lying to people about whether they had to sign up for selective service in World War I. I mean, right. This is just so much more significant than that. I mean, just trying to people into ending democracy in the United States. Again, that's not illegal, nothing is. It's crazy to think that it couldn't be. And the question is there sufficient evidence of criminal intent? It keeps dribbling out. There's certainly enough evidence by a preponderance of the evidence, as the judge ruled, and causing this memo to come out. And the question is, will the Justice Department, once it finishes its investigation, will it believe that it has enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt? And, they're working on that, as illustrated by, there was news the other day that John Eastman got a grand jury subpoena. So anyway, it's these are interesting times.
Yeah, wait, I'm sorry. Eastman got a subpoena or Navarro?
I'm sorry, Navarro. Sorry.
You're right, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure. No, I know. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't huge news. You were breaking huge news on our program.
Yes, Peter Navarro. You're right. Oh my God, it would be great news. Sorry.
Peter Navarro did get that subpoena, which is there's a grand jury that is looking into criminal exposure here, and that's very clear. George Conway, as always, thank you so much. Appreciate it.